Hello, and welcome to another live edition of Living in Vancouver, Washington with Realtor Cass. I'm Realtor Cass, also known as Cassandra Marks. I am a farmer with a wee little real estate problem, and today you have come to join me because there's probably an interesting topic. Today, I want to talk about a little bit of the Portland versus Vancouver. So I do a ton of relocation. And people are like, oh, I want to live in Portland. I want to live in Portland. I want to live in Portland. And well, sometimes that doesn't always turn out the way they want it to. And I think a lot of people are going to join in today with this discussion thinking that I'm going to sit and bash Portland. You may or may not be right. I'm not going to try to bash Portland, but I'm gonna address some of the topics of why people don't like living in Portland and why people like living in Vancouver and why people don't like living in Vancouver and why people like living in Portland. So we're going to talk over all of that today. But yeah, there's going to be bashing on both sides. But I need to say that when I want to tell you the story of me first. So I grew up in Minnesota, lived there for 30 years, and then relocated to the Denver area for a little bit, and then relocated to Portland. I lived in Southeast Portland for all y'all. I lived off 122nd and Stark. No. Sorry, I was there early. 122nd Powell, right next to the Safeway. We moved there. My husband is from Salem. We moved back to Portland because he needed to take care of some family stuff. And so we decided to move there because his friends lived just down the street from us, from this house that we found. So what we did is we were living in Denver and we're like, okay, we're going to move to Portland because we'd come back for a wedding and his mom needed help and his family needed help. And we're like, okay, fine, we'll come back. And so we flew into town on a Saturday morning from Denver, got picked up at the airport. We looked at 19 houses in 2 days and said, we're going to look at all these houses and we're going to pick one. And we did. And it was just down the street from his friends. Little did I know, because before that, back then, I was not a realtor. I didn't know about the whole, can't steer thing, this, that, and the other. I was like, hey, I was asking the realtor that was representing us, questions about the area. And he was just he said nothing. I was like, well, that's not very helpful. And so I was asking Andrew my husband, I was like, hey, what's going on? Little did he know he didn't know anything about it either because he grew up in Salem. So we moved into this house off 120th and 122nd and Powell. And for 2 years, we lived in a tiny house while we remodeled the big house, and my mom lived in the big house. And we played a lot of times. We were playing this really fun game. And by fun, I mean not fun. Was that gunshots or was that fireworks? Not really what I expected. I have lived in a few large cities. I grew up in, Minneapolis, St. Paul area, lived in pretty close to St. Paul for a while in my townhouse. It was great. I was in just outside of St. Paul in a little suburb. But I was still close. And then I lived in Denver, and I lived pretty close to Federal on Denver, right down by Little Mexico. And it was great. I loved living there. And we never had problems. We never had issues. It wasn't bad. It was great. We moved to Portland. We moved to Southeast Portland off 122nd and Powell, and bam, 2 years of that game. We were living behind in the backyard of the house, in the tiny house. And then we were right behind the strip mall. And then we were also, that was not the only game we were playing. The other game we were playing was, and this is really sad, and I have a really hard time saying this, but we were playing this other game called, is that person pooping in my backyard or are they ODing? So we did call the police multiple times for ODs, people doing drugs behind the strip mall that we could see. And we're like, I think they're dying. So we'd call. But we moved here. And I knew nothing about the area when we moved here. And I'm very open about, living in new places. I lived in the city for a long time and had no problems about it. And so I just kind of got tired of all of that and was like, hey, I grew up on a farm. Let's move to the farm. So we switched and we started looking. For an entire year, we looked. And eventually the things that brought us over into the Vancouver area were the fact that at the time, it was $100,000 cheaper to buy what we wanted in Vancouver than it was to buy it in south of Portland. So we were looking the Beaver Creek area, Oregon City, all down there because I wanted a farm. I wanted acreage and wanted land. And so we ended up here. So we've been up here now for over 4 years. And I get relo clients all the time that come in and they're like, I want to live in Portland, but I don't know, maybe I want to live in Vancouver. And so that's why I work with a lot of people, is because I am licensed in both and I've had experience living in both. So let's talk a little bit about ultimately why we picked Vancouver. Number one, yes, at the time it was $100,000 cheaper, and it was cheaper across the board to live in Vancouver. Do I think it's still a little bit cheaper now? Yes. If you're gonna ping like Portland proper versus Vancouver, yes, it's cheaper. Like the closer you get into Portland, obviously, the more expensive it gets. You're not going to find a $450,000 house right next to downtown, but you can find a $450,000 house just about anywhere in Vancouver. Minus a couple of the bigger neighborhoods, but like ultimately, like, yes, you can find that just about everywhere. The other thing, honestly, was the income tax. My husband received a 10% raise when we crossed the border into Washington, and it's huge. And so not paying income tax helps a lot, especially with a lot of things that are going on. So why, I guess the large question a lot of people have is, why are people, why Portland? Okay, why Portland? Big question. Okay, so many people, there's many different feels in Portland. It's the lifestyle. Oh, I live in Portland. There's like kind of like a clout. Like people are like, oh yeah, I live in Portland, Oregon. Like I'm cool. And people have seen Portlandia. I'm gonna tell you right now. I think I've watched a total of 2 episodes of Portlandia. Everybody tells me it's accurate, and I'm like, okay. And so we talk a little bit about like the clout in the east and the west side, and there's different feels. So like if you're living on the east side of Portland, it's more like city-like. You can bike. There's a lot more. It has this more like city feel to it. A lot of people bike on that side. They like use public transportation. You can walk out in your neighborhood, like on Hawthorne. There's like a bunch of shops and a bunch of restaurants. There's like nightlife in these little neighborhoods throughout the area. And then when you go to the west side, it's more suburban. It's because like Nike and Intel, like they're out there. So they have like more communities and more like housing communities that aren't like square blocks like the east side, because the east side's a lot older than the west side. I mean, some of the houses on the west side are pretty old, but like as you start to get out to like Hillsboro, Beaverton, Forest Grove and everything like that, it's newer. There's a lot of new build, a lot of new construction going on over there, where on the east side, there's a lot of infill. So people, they want that. It's young and it's a progressive city. So people love that. It's also got like a huge foodie culture. People are like, oh my gosh, I love food. Portland's got a lot of good places to eat. Do I go to them? Not necessarily, but they do. A lot of people come here for the food, the coffee, all that kind of thing. Then they also come for the culture. There's a lot of arts, there's a lot of culture, there's a lot of, I would say there's a lot of cultural diversity. But I was kind of looking it up earlier before this, and was surprised to find that it wasn't as culturally diverse as I thought it was. I was expecting a little bit more than it was. But the other thing, like obviously, why do people come to Portland? Well, why do people come to the Pacific Northwest? That's the big one, is nature. They want to be outside. They want to do things outside. They want to have activities outside. So I get it. I understand it. But, let me tell you, why not Portland? Okay. So I get a lot of relo coming in, and they send me a list of houses. I'm like, okay, let's go look at them. So we drive around and we go and look at houses. They'll fly in. I'll pick them up. We'll drive around. We'll look at houses, and like multiple people over multiple years have asked me this question. They're like, as we're driving around and you see tents and shopping carts and people sleeping on the sidewalks and just all this stuff, people are like, is there any part of Portland that's not like this? And I'm like Happy Valley, the west side, like deep west side. I'm like, if you stay away from the Max or the light rail, you have a better chance of not seeing it as much. I'm like, but it's around. And it gets especially bad when you get into downtown Portland, because that's where a lot of the services are for people. And so, it's really hard to see that. And, the other thing that's really killed me since I moved here is that I came from Minnesota, and people picked up the freeway like 4 times a year, not 2 times a year, not 1 time a year, 4 times a year. Like there's always people picking up trash. You never saw trash around. And I really love that, because people love the outdoors. Well, when I've been here and people are like, there's trash everywhere, there's graffiti everywhere. They're like, it's kind of disheartening and kind of gross. And so that's one of the big things that people have said. And I'm like, okay, well, we can go over to Vancouver and take a look, like if you want, or we can go out to the suburbs. Maybe Portland proper is not the place that you want to be. So it's pretty bad. Another reason is the crime and police response. I'll be really honest. So story time. Had a friend work from home. Someone was trying to break into their house in the middle of the day. Called the police. Police like, sorry, we don't have anyone to send. Someone's breaking into their effing house and they didn't have anybody to send. They're like, sorry, we don't have anyone to send right now. They're all busy. And then I think it was KGW did a news story one day, and I wish I could have found it. I was looking for it before this, and said that 9 out of 10 police, events police respond to are for Narcan, for ODs. And a lot of that has to do with the decriminalization of the drugs that they did. Well, let me tell you, that ended just recently. And people are just kind of sweeping it under the rug. They're not really saying, oh yeah, that was a bad thing to do. The thing is the reason it was a bad thing to do was because they didn't have an after plan. They just okay, we're going to decriminalize it. Now what do we do with everybody who's using the drugs? They're supposed to be going into programs. They're supposed to be going into treatment. They're supposed to be doing they had none of that set up. So they're like, oh yeah, we're so progressive, we're so liberal, we're going to do all these things. And then it just got really bad. Oh my gosh. So people didn't want to go to downtown Portland because they're like, okay, I'm going to step on needles. There's needles everywhere. They have a couple, and don't get me wrong, I think clean needles are great because it helps not spread disease. But in other cities, they have a 1-for-1 exchange. There is a nonprofit that hands out needles, clean needles here in Portland, that doesn't require a fucking 1-for-1 exchange. That is why there is needles all over in Portland, is because people just get new needles and they don't have to turn them in. So they don't have to clean up after themselves. So it's it's too much. So that's another reason, not Portland. People have that. Taxes. Taxes are not Portland reason. Taxes are huge. There's a new tax every day. I think I pay 7 taxes every time I help someone buy or sell a home in Portland proper. And so you're seeing things like an arts tax. You have things like air conditioning tax, because they believe that everyone should have the right to air conditioning, regardless of how much money they make. So I was reading in this one article about that, and they were talking about taxes. And so it said, let me see if I can find it here, that Portland is the number 2 most taxed city in the country. And if I could find out how to share, I have no idea how to do this. I'm going to try share. That's not the share I want, though. I want to share my screen, but I don't know if it's going to let me do that. Ooh, share screen. There's the button. All right. Decriminalization. We want people making $250,000. Okay. Here, income is fun. All right. So right here. So high income earners in Portland, Oregon are penalized when jumping from that $100,000 range up to the $250,000 range. All right. And that's stating that in there it is it's 41% of your income. So there's basically no reason to go from 100,000 to 250,000 in Portland, because they're just going to take 41% of it, which is a lot. It's a lot of money. That is a lot of money. And let's really talk about this. 41% of 250,000. Okay. So I know there's not a lot of people that make 250,000, so that's 102,000 in taxes. But do you know what the average household needs to make in Portland to buy a home? The average household. All right. That's what kills me, is because they are taxing, they're taxing the range that people need to buy homes. It is so hard to buy a home in Portland as a first-time home buyer, is because home buyers need to make 65,000 more than they did in 2020. And how much is that? 100. You need to make $161,000 as a household to afford a home in Portland. That's a lot. That is a lot. And then on top of that, you're going to be taxed 40% on your income. So how does it makes it even harder to make $61,000 or $161,000 to buy. That is why we see so many young people jump the river into Vancouver to buy a home, is because it is more affordable in the long run. Even though the houses are almost the same price, it is still in the long run more affordable in Vancouver to buy a home because you're not paying income tax. So why else here? Why else not Portland? So we talked a little bit about that. We talked about, the money thing. I mean, that's huge. That's huge. And why, honestly, I think that's the biggest reason why not Portland. It's because it's just not affordable and how much they tax people. It is the second highest tax city in the country. And it definitely doesn't have the highest income. So just wondering what's going on there. So, okay. I've bashed Vancouver a lot, or bashed Portland a lot. I did live there. There's always tons of things to do. There's places to go, things to see, but Vancouver, it's not like Vancouver is 40 billion miles away. Vancouver is right over the river. And, so why Vancouver? My biggest reason, my family's biggest reason, the two of them, was because, number one, it was $100,000 cheaper to move over here price-wise for houses. So in March, the numbers just came out for March. And in March, Portland metro area average home price was $590,000. That was Portland metro. It's the Tri-County area. So it's Portland metro. And then the average home price in the Vancouver area, which is pretty much, I think they're calling it just about all of Clark County. They are stating that it is $575,000 to buy a home. With that, in Vancouver, you typically get larger lots. You typically get a little bit bigger house. You typically get, you're a little bit further from some of the things you need, whether it is grocery stores or whatnot, but they're still around. But overall, I think you get more house in Vancouver than you do in Portland. So why Vancouver? It does have a different vibe. I just went to a cycle class this morning at Cycle Bar in downtown Vancouver. I love trying new fitness classes. And I went to try this one because I've never done a cycle, like a spin class, ever in my life. I went to try it, and the instructor and I connected through Instagram, and we were chatting and stuff. We have mutual friends. And, she was telling me all about when they moved here from Vegas, they loved Portland, and then it just kind of became too much. And then they moved to Vancouver, and she's like, I want to buy a house, and I do not want to do it in Portland. I want to live in Vancouver. It's just a different vibe. And it's really hard to explain. But I think I can use demographics to explain it a little bit, and some of the more economic data. So give me a shot here. I'm going to try my best. I wish I could show both of these at the same time, but I don't think it's going to let me. So let me see here. All right, let's start with Portland, Oregon, and a little bit about what is going on in Portland. So let's go. So, okay, population, blah, 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 670 or 647,000, right? Median household income, 78,000. This is a little dated. This was back in 2020, I believe, 2021 numbers. So it's a little dated at this point. But what I want to show and get to, this is off of datausa.io, is down here, the employment stats. Okay, so one of the largest employment stats for Portland is people getting management occupations. So they are people in the workforce. They are managers. So it's 12.8%. Okay. So let's switch. And I wish I could switch. I wish I could switch faster. And I'm sorry. Let's switch over to the economic data for Vancouver. And we're going to go look. We're at the same website here. We're going to go look. Did I miss it? Nope. Here we go. Let's look at this. Management occupations, 9.1% here in Vancouver, which is different than what we saw in Portland at 12.8%. I went through and I looked through this entire thing to find out where it is. You're going to see higher office administration. You're going to see higher sales and related occupations. You are going to see higher numbers of food preparation and serving related occupations. And then down here, this is the big one. In Vancouver, you're going to see more transportation occupations, production occupations, construction and extraction, and installation maintenance. All of these. So Vancouver is much more blue collar than Portland. Portland's got more tech, more business, more, computer math. They're more in this section. And Vancouver is more all over here. And so I think that makes a really difference in culture and in vibe when it comes to what people are doing and what the area feels like. And I think that's a lot that says a lot about what people have encountered when they have either lived in Portland for a while or lived over. And I feel the same way. I feel like Portland has just got this like little like it's like this little snobby feeling like, oh, I live in Portland. And I'm like, great, I live in Vancouver. And like I feel like they call it Vantucky, they call it the Couve. And Vantucky might be a little right, but they're a little more blue collar. They work differently. They have different occupations. So we're seeing a lot of a different occupation. And I really do think that contributes to the culture and to the feel of the neighborhoods and to the feel of the area. And so I think that's one thing, slower quality. And a lot of the other thing too, is like people pay a lot of money to live in Portland. The houses are smaller, the apartments are smaller, they're all closer together. So you're just crowding all these people in. And where in Vancouver, there's some areas, and they're actually going to start the new urban growth boundary is coming out in 2025. And it sounds like, I've been to a couple meetings, and it sounds like they're going to take a little page from Portland and they're going to try to do more density instead of spreading out the urban growth boundary. You guys probably couldn't hear me. My bad. Hopefully you can. I don't really want to do this again. But ultimately, I think that there's culturally, there is a difference between the two cities and the two states. But I think that if you want access to arts, if you want access to food, if you want access to culture, that is all still very, very available in the Vancouver area, like very available. There are lots of different, lots of different activities. There's lots of different festivals that go on throughout the Vancouver area. And just because you live in Vancouver doesn't mean you can't go to Portland. Like I go to Portland Trailblazers games. I go to Thorns games. I go out with my friends. Like we went and got happy hour in the Hollywood district the other day for my birthday. So it's not saying like you can't go over to Portland. It's just saying like they're very different. And, when looking at it from a perspective of why this or why not this or why this and, why not this, I think that people need to really identify what's important to them. And as we age, I think that changes. I think it used to be very important for me when I was growing up, when I was living in the city back in Minneapolis, to go out, to be with my friends, to go to the bars, to go to the hip neighborhoods and that kind of thing. And that's a lot of the case now still, probably for a lot of the younger folk in Portland. Now that I've gotten older, I want to sit at home and drink a glass of wine and just enjoy myself. And it's been, I've become you as you get older, your priorities change, your things change. You might have kids, or, you might have an aging parent that you need to take care of. So things change. You're not like going to bars all the time. You're not going out. You might still go out and do things, but just not to the near, like, I don't know about you, but when I was 20, I was out like 6 nights a week. I was never home. I would come home, I would sleep, I'd get up, I'd go to work, I'd come home, change maybe, or I might just go straight from work out with my friends. Like home was a place, whether it was an apartment or the house I owned, was a place that I slept. And that was about it. And I did everything else away from the house. But other reasons why, you know, we talked about the housing prices that's less dense. We still have all that food and that culture. So why not Vancouver? And I was struggling with this bullet point just because I love it here so much. So these reasons were a little difficult for me. Why not Vancouver? If you are working in Portland, I am going to highly suggest that you do not commute. The commute is brutal. I try to avoid it as much as possible. Like when people want to have like an 8 a.m. or a 9 a.m. meeting, or sometimes even a 10 a.m. meeting in Portland, I'm like, it depends where it is, because I might not make it. I had a closing in Lake Oswego. We had a signing in Lake Oswego. And that's normally like a 45-minute drive for me. It was an hour and 45 minutes one day. And it's only going to get worse because they are getting ready and been talking about it for years now, to fix the I-5 bridge, which means everything is going to get pushed to one side of the bridge. So one whole side will be shut down while they fix it and make it bigger or whatever they're going to do to it. Or all the traffic's going to go over to the Glen Jackson on 205. So the commute back and forth is going to become even worse. So I don't recommend, if you are living in Vancouver, to commute to Portland. The other reason is, if you live in Vancouver and you work in Portland and you commute to Portland, you're still paying those taxes. You're not getting the benefit of living and working in Washington. And that's difficult. Like if you can work from home, you can get that benefit. But if you don't, then you're going to be paying those income taxes still to the state. So then it's kind of like, okay, is it really more affordable for me to live over here? Because now you're going to have a long commute. Your house is about the same price. It's a little bit bigger, but it's about the same price. But then you're going to have to commute back and forth and spend all those hours in the car. So that's you. The other reason why not Vancouver is because if you are a douchebag, we do not want you. I'm sorry. I live by the work hard, be kind motto. I like to be kind to people. I do not like to be mean or brutal. I mean, I can say brutal things about different things, but like I genuinely, we just don't want people. And what I've experienced with almost all the people I've experienced here in Vancouver have been super nice. Like they kind of keep to themselves, but they're still like cordial and friendly. All my neighbors are great. I mean, we live on acreage. I know all of our neighbors. I mean, I have talked to almost all of them last night because of some random woman standing at the end of my driveway in the middle of nowhere last night. But it was interesting. It's interesting. Like we just don't want that negativity, that bad attitude, all that kind of stuff. We kind of like, you're allowed to have your opinions, but don't be mean. Like we don't want mean people. And that's one thing that I definitely have encountered quite a bit in Portland, is people are just like, oh, Portland's so nice. And no, they're not. They're nice if you agree with everything they say. If you have any sort of varying opinion, they do not like that. So why not Vancouver? Those are my two reasons. Oh, commuting. Also, if you just like don't really like the farm life, or maybe you want like a higher tech job, they are moving some of those higher tech jobs. There's a few companies that are tech here. The Vancouver Tech Center is growing in size. They'll be adding some more buildings and stuff down there, but ultimately, like there's probably just not as much tech over here. But if you can work remotely, then it doesn't really matter. So that's it. Those are my feelings, my thoughts, my concerns. We've been on here for 29 minutes. I cannot believe I just talked for 29 minutes. I probably bored your face off. But yeah, So a lot of it has to do, I think, honestly, like my reasons and my husband's reasons were monetary. And I think a lot of people are thinking the same way right now is, no income tax and more affordable houses and more house. And that's what people want right now is more house. So that's where we're at. I hope I kind of gave you some ideas of why, Portland versus Vancouver. I hope this helped out today. If you've got more questions, please reach out to me. I'm going to link a bunch of articles and a bunch of other stuff that we talked about today down in the description. And if you've got more questions about Portland, if you've got your own comments, concerns, requests, or dedications about Portland or Vancouver, please drop them down below. I would love to sort out anything, misconceptions about either. Like, I still don't hate Portland. I just think that there's a lot of challenges down there that aren't as much up here. Tons of it. So, anyways, my name is Cassandra Marks, also known as Realtor Cass. I am a farmer with a wee little real estate problem here in the Vancouver area. I can help you anywhere from Longview to Salem and all the way from Mount Hood to the beach. So if you've got questions about a first home, a second home, whatever, I'm always here for you. And next week, we're going to do one more live next week. And next week, we're going to talk all about city living versus country living, because I've done them both and there are pros and cons to both. One of the really big ones, and I've covered this in one of my videos, is say goodbye to plushy toilet paper. And I will tell you why again, or you can go catch that video on my channel. So until then, have a lovely Saturday evening. Thanks for joining in, and I will see you again soon. Bye.